Hey, I hope you're doing well. My name's Jake. I'm a big fan of making music, and I'll be honest, I want to spend every single day of my life in the recording studio. Now, that's not a new thought for me. I've been thinking about it for years, and over those years, I've been accumulating music supplies to basically turn my home into a studio. It's honestly awesome. I get to jump into projects as soon as I'm feeling inspired. I get to work as long as I want, and everything is kind of dialed in exactly how I would want to see it for a studio setup. And I just wanted to share that with you guys. Maybe it inspires some of you for how you can optimize your setups. Maybe it'll inspire me for how I can build mine out even further. Now, there's a ton of equipment to go over, so I think it would be best to split this into a few videos. And for this first video, let's just go take a look at the pedal board. Okay, so we're at the pedal board here, and before we dive into any of the specific pedals, I just want to point out that this pedal board is actually on a stand. I don't know how well you can see that, but the stand is actually on wheels here too, so I can move it around the studio as I need to. I'm usually just moving it around very slightly to get stuff plugged in or disconnected. So that was a cool little project. I actually built that with my dad, just a nice custom stand, shelving unit as well where I keep some mics. The other thing I'll point out before we start talking about specific pedals is that these cables right here pretty much stay connected to the board at all times. This is just an instrument cable, and it's actually connected to a DI. I don't know how well we can show the DI, but yeah, basically down here, I have a DI box, and then the output of that is connected right here to this cord. It's just labeled DI box. That way I can basically nice and easily take a DI signal every time I need to use the pedal board. I don't have to think about connecting all that stuff up just because I want to take a DI. This is the power supply for the board. It's connected to a power box that's underneath. So I'll show that to you in a little bit. But let's just kind of dive into the pedals now. And I'll just walk you through everything in the order that it shows up in the signal, so you can get a sense of some decisions that were made, in that sense. Obviously a ton of stuff crammed into this board, but it all starts with this Fuzzfoot Mini from JHS. That's first because it's an impedance sensitive pedal. So, I wanted to make sure that this happened before anything else in the signal chain. Out of the Fuzzfoot, we're going underneath the board to my input buffer, and then out of the input buffer, coming back up here to this MXR vintage bass octave pedal. So that's kind of my octave down sound. Now out of this guy, we go into the Pitchfork. The Pitchfork can do a really nice octave down, but it also has this toggle switch so that you can do an octave up. And then this knob actually lets you pick between not only an octave up or down, which is probably what I'm using most commonly, but you can do all sorts of other intervals, a minor second, a major second, perfect fourth, all that kind of stuff. So really, really wacky stuff out of this guy. Really wacky stuff if I use both of these together, just get some monster sounds. Now, all three of these pedals have a pretty significant impact on volume. So out of that, I go into this compressor pedal. It's the bass compressor from MXR, but someone told me along the way, it's actually the same circuit as their studio compressor pedal. So it's a very versatile 1176 compressor that I use for pretty much anything that I might be tracking through the pedal board. Now, here we have the MXR bass envelope filter. This is definitely more of a bass pedal, but I guess it sounds really nice on guitar too, but it's definitely tailored to the bass frequencies, and it gives that auto wah sound. So from there, we get into basically a wall of modulation and distortion pedals, and I kind of went alternating back and forth between modulation, distortion, modulation, distortion. That way, as I'm layering modulation and distortion, sometimes I want the distortion first, sometimes I want the modulation first. And this basically just gives me a ton of flexibility with that. So my most extreme modulation pedal is probably the flanger. It's just a very present sound. So I wanted that earliest so that if I wanted to bury that effect in layers of distortion, it's at the very front of all of these pedals. So the flanger from TC Electronics. Then I go into my softer distortion. So this is the plumes from Earthquaker Devices, which is similar to a TS9, tube screamer kind of sound. This is the Timmy from MXR, which is a like Klon style pedal. Both different flavors of like a softer distortion, basically. This is my handy dandy tie wrap that's holding this plug-in. I don't know why, but for some reason pops out if I don't have the tie wrap. So such is life. And then out of here, we go to the phaser, because I really like to have the phaser before my harder distortion. So yeah, it's Timmy to the phaser. This is the Deep Phase by MXR. It's honestly a pretty extreme phase sound. I might want to swap this out for just like a phase 95 or something like that. But, you know, definitely gets that phaser effect. And then we pop over here to the Pack Rat from JHS. This is like a hard clipping distortion. But I mean, go check out Josh's video on this because it's a monster pedal. The amount of rat distortion circuits that they crammed into one box is pretty amazing. I'm still wrapping my head around like how I actually want to use all of the different circuits. I tend to just kind of leave it set one way and then barely turn it on. But I need to take a deep dive with it and really get my head around it. Really awesome pedal though. And then after that, I have the chorus from Boss, the CH1. You know, I really like the chorus sound, so I want that last in the signal chain because I want to basically be able to hear that amidst all of the distortion and stuff. But yeah, between these 5 pedals, you know, from here through these guys, up here, over there, and then to the chorus, tons and tons of flexibility when it comes to how do I want to combine my distortion and my modulation? Do I want to stack 2 or 3 distortion pedals to get this really woofy, you know, woolly sound out of the pedals? Do I want to have the phaser, you know, really present? And so I'm going to kind of use these more extremely, get my distortion here, and then put the phaser on the end. Maybe I want the phaser kind of buried by this thing. Just so many possibilities between these 5 pedals. Now, outside of these 2 rows that we've already looked at, we have sort of the Mac Daddy of top row stuff. So it all goes over here. From the chorus basically over to this guy, which is the Boss IR200, and that's an amp simulation pedal. So you can see there's controls for like gain and level and, you know, an EQ. Then you can switch between amps and cabinets. And then this thing has an effects loop, so that's why there's so many plugs in the back. And then the effects loop goes to these 3 guys. So, you know, there are certain sounds that to me are more useful when they come after amp distortion. And that would be like delays, reverbs, and occasionally modulation. So in the effects loop of the amp simulator, at the very end of the signal chain, we have these 3 pedals. This guy is a delay reverb from Earthquaker Devices called the Avalanche Run. I actually already made a demo of this, so if you want to kind of take a closer look at what this thing sounds like, please check that out. It is a phenomenal pedal, and it's just so easy to dial in like a little delay and reverb, and also kind of try more extreme things if I want to do that. But it's a very hands-on kind of pedal. And then we have this Wampler Terraform, which essentially is like a bunch of different modulation pedals in one box. So even though I have all the modulation pedals down here, I got flanger and phaser and chorus. If I really want those flavors after all of my amp sims, after some of the delay and reverb, I can use this, and it's just going to make sure that that is like one of the most present effects that's being added to the signal. Really gives it that like psychedelic feel when you have your modulation at the very end of the signal chain. So this is great. I've barely touched the surface with this guy as well, but amazing chorus and flanger and envelope filters, auto wah, you know, a swell, a harmonic tremolo, all sorts of cool stuff there. And then we close things off with the Source Audio Collider, which is another delay and reverb. Now, why do I have 2 delay reverbs? Is this kind of a bit overkill? Yeah, I mean, it probably is, but the reality is different flavors in these boxes, you know, but also this is more of a programmable guy, so I can save presets and, you know, kind of have set it and forget it stuff going on here while I'm a bit more hands-on with this guy. The last thing is too, like, sometimes you want to like stack a delay into a delay. Sometimes you want to go reverb and then delay, or maybe delay and then reverb. And having the flexibility to split the load between these two pedals, it's basically just a way to be more creative with how I'm using delay and reverb. So that's pretty much it for the top side of the board. Give me 1 sec and we'll get this thing flipped over. All right, so we've got the board flipped over, and not a ton we need to talk about here, but just kind of wanted to show you what's going on under the hood. This is the power supply. I'm using the Chocs DC7 and DC8. I actually have all of the outputs labeled here, and that's just so that, in the future, if I need to troubleshoot anything, especially if I'm doing that on a gig, it's going to be very handy to, be able to flip things over, disconnect a power supply, and, see if that's the issue that's going on. So obviously, a lot of tie wraps and stuff to kind of keep everything organized. This was a really fun project, honestly, to kind of go through and get this all tidied up. Over here, I have the input buffer that I mentioned earlier. That's basically after the fuzz pedal. And then over here, we have 2 output buffers. All of those are the JHS, I don't know what it's called. It's a buffer from JHS. It's great. And these output buffers are then connected to these, small cords here. So basically, I can connect my board through these plugs. That's the output of the board. And it's just kind of neatly coming off of these output buffers here. The buffers, my understanding is it essentially just resets the impedance as best as you can. So, guitar cables, they lose some of their high frequency over long stretches of chord. And, you want to sort of reset the impedance early on in your signal chain. And then, if you got a lot of pedals afterwards as well, just so that you have the cleanest possible sound going to, the next thing in the signal chain. Well, there you have it. What an awesome pedal board. I mean, I'm so glad that I have that basically right next to my desk. I'm able to just plug in and get to work right away, start tweaking knobs and dialing in the sound that I need. It honestly has been endless fun having this thing by my side. If you want to see a demo of any of these pedals, just drop that in the comments below and I'll try to get to it. Now, if you want to see what other equipment I have in the studio, get subscribed and you'll be notified when I get around to the rest of the studio tour. So thanks for watching. That's it for this one. And until next time, let's go make some music.